Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. Here on the South Fork of the Flathead River, and it's a beautiful day. It's going to be in the high 80s and perfect sun. Well, I've been setting up here. Had some fish jump behind me, some nice cutthroat. Had some fishermen come by. I think they're probably going to fish a little bit downstream. But it's a gorgeous day. Now, today, we're in for a treat. I've been working on this for a while, and before I get into it, I want to tell you that what propagated this new series was a book that was written by George Knapp and Colm Kelleher. And you've heard me talk about it 1,000 times, The Hunt for Skinwalker. And Kelleher was the chief investigator and manager for Robert Bigelow when he was doing the work under NABS at the ranch. And Kelleher and Knapp wrote this book, and it's outstanding. I don't say that about many books. This one is outstanding. Now, George and Colm have been involved in telling the story behind the ranch for a long time. Now, within the last year, another individual has come forward, an individual named James Lickatsky. James was part of the Defense Intelligence Agency of our government. He was a manager, and he, George Knapp and Colm Kelleher, wrote a book called Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. This new series that I'm doing is about this book. And I'm going to go through it with you and explain exactly what the book lays out. And I'm going to tell you that I'm not through it yet, but so far what I've read, I'm hooked. And we're going to talk about some of the things that George Kelleher and Lickatsky wrote in the book and how it applies to some of the things that I've worked on over the years. So as we go forward here, I'm not going to release the big secrets in the book. I want you to go out and get it. George is a friend, Kelleher is a friend, and I've deeply respected their work. So let's move forward with the review of the book. Now, to appreciate the book, you need to understand who these players are that wrote it. You know, are they bozos? Are they credible? Are they high intellects? Some people in our world don't have an inquisitory nature. Others do. Others don't want to know about what may be in the woods behind me. I do. And these people that work for Mr. Bigelow, that work for Bigelow Aerospace, that work for the National Institute of Discovery of Sciences, that worked for BASS, that worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency, they want to know. And because of that, that intrigues me. Why these people want to know. So let's talk about the first new person who's on scene, Mr. James Lickatsky. He was an Aerospace Weapons Systems Applications Program Manager at the Defense Intelligence Agency. He has a PhD as a rocket scientist for the DoD. His full name is James Thomas Lickatsky. Co-authored the book with George Knapp. From 84 to 86, he was a joint author on several technical papers regarding plasma engineering investigations in torsatron reactors. In 86, he was an engineering assistant in the nuclear design section at the Duke Power Company, responsible for reactor core design and operating predictions, startup, and plant support. From 2006 to 2016, Mr. Lickatsky had put in 10 years of government service. Subsequent to that, Robert Bigelow had invited him to Skinwalker Ranch after Mr. Lickatsky wrote a letter to him requesting that his agency have access to his ranch. When Lickatsky came to the ranch, within just hours, he was in a building and he saw an orb fly through the room and he was hooked. You got to understand something. It's very rare when someone in such a high position in our secretive government comes out and starts talking about things that are very unusual, out of our control. And there is something that's important, out of our control. Why is that important? Because I've stated before, I don't believe our government wants to admit it to anything that it can't control. So, Mr. Lickatsky, super high credibility, highly educated, had a high position in our government as a program manager at the DIA. Colm Kelleher. Colm was Bigelow's right-hand man. He was a very important figure at the ranch as he was chief of all investigations. I've met with Mr. Kelleher multiple times. Aerospace developer and billionaire Robert Bigelow has an extensive history of interest in the UFO topic, but this story really begins with his creation of the National Institute of the Discovery of Sciences in 1995, NIDS. Like Bigelow Aerospace, NIDS was located in Las Vegas and was described on their website as a privately funded science institute engaged in research of aerial phenomena, animal mutilations, and other related anomalous phenomena. The science board that put together by Mr. Kelleher included Hal Puthoff, chairman, John B. Alexander, Jacques Vallée, John Schleusler from MUFON. In '96, Mr. Bigelow purchased Skinwalker Ranch in Utah to have the organization study its events. Journalist George Knapp worked closely with Bigelow's organization, maintained a working relationship with NIDS since its inception, and had earned the trust of the principal figures in the organization. Bigelow shared on a confidential basis incident reports and a comprehensive chronology of the Skinwalker Ranch incidents. In late 2002, Knapp received permission from NIDS to write an account of the ranch activities with Colm Kelleher. Several of the NIDS studies of paranormal research were presented by papers on their site in categories anomalous aerial phenomena, animal pathology research, astrobiology, and consciousness studies. Despite the money and talent, NIDS was deactivated in October 2004, with Mr. Bigelow stating it is unfortunate that there isn't more activity as there was in the past that warrants investigation. However, he went on to say should substantial activity occur with the need of our investigation, then NIDS will be reactivated with new personnel. And I've stated this before. When you have a site that gives you very little information, especially very little on camera that you can document, prove, and discuss later, when that slows down, teams go away. That's what happened with NIDS. That may happen with the Skinwalker Ranch series, who knows? Kelleher is a senior research scientist with a 20-year career in cell and molecular biology. He has a PhD in biochemistry from the University of Dublin. Dr. Kelleher worked at Canada's flagship Ontario Cancer Institute, the Terry Fox Laboratory at the British Columbia Cancer Research Centre in Vancouver, and the National Jewish Center of Immunology and Respiratory Medicine in Denver. More recently, Dr. Kelleher served as research director for Bigelow Aerospace in Las Vegas and as administrator for one of its subsidiaries, Space Sciences, Inc. Chief investigator for NIDS and director of BASS, he was integral in the development of space station modules under Bigelow Aerospace. Colm Kelleher is one of the most diverse individuals I've ever met and had the privilege to speak with in detail over time. He was willing to put his reputation and integrity on the line to research things the majority of science won't touch. It's an absolute embarrassment to science that they won't touch and go out and research these things. But Mr. Kelleher put a first-class board together and first-class employees to look at this. The third person in the wheel. Now, when you talk about the people that are doing this work and are putting this in front of you to understand, One of the best people I could imagine to do that would be George Knapp. I first met George, 15 years ago. He had me on Coast to Coast AM. And I think he and I did, I don't know how many shows, but I've done over 40 on Coast to Coast at this point. Some of the interviews that we've done over the time have been absolutely stunning. The words of people that watch, not me. Now, George Knapp, born in Woodbury, New Jersey, Knapp grew up in Northern California and graduated from Franklin High School in Stockton, where he was senior class president. I did the research on him. I didn't even know that. He earned a bachelor's degree in communication from the University of West Georgia and a master's degree in the same field from the University of Pacific. He taught debate and forensics at both the University of Pacific and the University of California, Berkeley. He moved to Las Vegas in the early 80s, working first as a cab driver before being hired as an intern and then a news reporter at a PBS station. From there, Knapp was hired as a reporter and news anchor for KLAS, a CBS affiliate. Knapp became known nationally in the late 80s by reporting on the story of Bob Lazar, who saw extraterrestrial craft in Area 51. Due in part to Knapp's discovery of evidence corroborating some of Lazar's claims, Knapp's stories on Lazar were taken more seriously than typical UFO fare. In '91, Knapp left KLAS to work for Altamira Communications, a public relations firm whose clients included advocates of the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Repository. Knapp was rehired by KLAS in the mid-90s when he left the PR firm. He wrote a regular column titled Napster for the now-defunct alternative news weekly Las Vegas Mercury. Let me say, if you can get your hands on any of those articles that George wrote for the Las Vegas Mercury, they were great articles. The articles now appear in the Las Vegas City Life, an alternative news weekly published by Stevens Media. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Knapp worked with the now-defunct National Institute of Discovery of Science, founded by Bigelow. In 2004, Knapp won a National Edward R. Murrow Award for a story he wrote about the fraud in Clark County, Nevada. He also won over a dozen Emmy Awards and several writing awards from the AP. Knapp and photojournalist Matt Adams were recognized for their work in the investigative series Crossfire, Water, Power, and Politics that received a 2008 Peabody Award. So George has always worked with the same videographer, photojournalist, Matt Adams. Let me tell you, I know Matt because I've done several interviews with George for his CBS station. Great guy, super credible, super good videographer, family man. Matt, if you're watching, you have my deep respect. So I did a series of interviews for George at KLAS. Also did a series of interviews with him on Coast to Coast. George Knapp was the first man who gave me my step into your world. He really gave me the first spot on Coast to Coast. Other people have claimed they did. It was George. And George later introduced me to Colin Kelleher, who, again, fascinating man. Now, so if you've never met George or you've never seen any of his work, that's George. Right now he's still working for KLAS. He has a video channel called Mystery Wire, where he talks about UFOs and things that's worth looking into. Now I want to talk about somebody named Harry Reid, former senator from Nevada, now deceased. George developed a relationship with Harry, and he did several interviews with him over the time at KLAS. Harry Reid had a long-time interest in UFOs. In 2007, Bigelow contacted Reid and told him of a letter he received from James Lickatsky. And Lickatsky said that he worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency at the time, Pentagon's version of the CIA, and requested permission to come to the ranch. What few people know about Harry Reid. Very religious man. And ironically, he was a Mormon. And why is that interesting? because the new owner of the ranch, Brandon Fugal, is also a Mormon. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I was raised in the Mormon church, and the people I have met over the years that have been Mormon have been some of the nicest, most ethical, polite people I've ever met. I'm not saying everybody in the church is like that, because I know that's not true. But the ones I've met are that way. Now, when you hear things about Brandon Fugal these days, I think about 80% of it is complete garbage, and they're not telling the truth about the man. I don't believe Brandon would do anything unethical. And his work at the ranch is a statement to him putting his integrity behind his projects. So if you're hearing something about Brandon that's negative, it's just political twist, and I wouldn't even believe it. But what happened is that in the letter that Lickatsky sent, said he worked for the Defense Institute, he was a manager, and he worked for the Defense Warning Office at DIA. Now I find that interesting, Defense Warning Office. He stated that his agency was greatly aware of the strangeness associated with the area of the ranch for generations. Let's think about this for a second. Our Defense Intelligence Agency, you tend to think that, well, maybe they're looking into China and what's China doing and what's Russia doing, but I'm kind of proud of them. I hate to say it, but they're looking into things like what's happening at the ranch. And that's what he stated in the letter. And they knew about strange things happening in that area for generations. Wasn't that fascinating? And since they have known about it, I'd like to know what else they've researched about it. But Lickatsky was invited to the ranch, wrote a proposal, and was eventually given a budget for study. At the cornerstone of all this, Reid. Harry provided many of the interviews for George Knapp, many of the introductions regarding UFOs and their background in our government. I doubt much would have been done on this topic that we're talking about today if it wasn't for Reid. So, when you think about this topic in general, I've noticed that many of you give it a huge thumbs down. It's all for theater. None of it's true. Why are you here? I'm not going to try to convince anybody that if it's true or not. I'm going to try to give you a background on why I find it intriguing. Now, I've said before that on one of the radio shows, George said that somebody in our government had told him that my work was related to what's happening at the ranch. Subsequent to that, an individual related to Bigelow's work, National Institute of Discovery Sciences, NIDS, contacted me and asked for copies of the U.S. missing persons map. I find that fascinating. Of course I turned them over. And what's the association? I wish I knew. But without anybody telling me anything, our team was able to stumble onto locations that NIDS had been to outside of our country. In the research I was doing, I went to spots and walked into locations where people said, hey, you didn't even know this, Dave, but NIDS was here several months ago. Or NIDS has been here before asking the same questions. So whatever they're doing, I was on their heels. Now, I don't know exactly their intent on why I was at these locations, but many things are going to become very clear to you in the next 3 to 4 months as we walk this path. Trust me on this. You're going to say, Dave, why are you wasting so much time on Skinwalker Ranch? you will understand. Now, the only thing I ask of you is you're here because you trust my integrity and my credibility. And when I tell you that people like Kelleher and the team he's put together and the board for NABS are some of the most credible researchers and investigators you can imagine. And the really important thing is that these individuals were free thinkers. They weren't controlled by others. They weren't managed to say things by others. If you've heard me talk about Jacques Vallée before, Jacques was on the board of NABS. Jacques is a brilliant man. He doesn't make many public appearances. He's very quiet and probably doesn't like to be questioned. Doesn't want to be embarrassed. And he'd probably give me that advice if he was with me. He'd say, Dave, probably shouldn't talk because you're going to get attacked. All he'd have to do is look at Wikipedia to see the attack I'm under. That's okay. I don't care. So, the introduction on Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, you've got it now. You understand the players. You understand their background. And in the coming weeks, I'm going to walk you through what they found with the assistance of the Defense Intelligence Agency. And what George, Calm, and Lickatsky laid out in the book so far that I've gotten to. Interesting stuff. Keep an open mind. Keep a warm heart. Do something nice for someone out there. Be polite and appreciative and have gratitude. Do a little scan of the area for you so you can see what beauty I'm in right now. That's downstream. That would be towards Columbia Falls. Right here in this stretch. Fish have been jumping. It's gorgeous. Now, to a fly fisherman, the water here is clear, but it's not gin clear. It's good fishing water. There are some people in this area, but that's okay. Right there, that is Columbia Mountain. I've written about Columbia Mountain and missing 411 Montana. Young man disappeared and was never found there. Columbia Mountain is directly across from the Montana vortex, which I'm not far from. So, there you go. South Fork of the Flathead River in a beautiful day in July. And I don't know if you saw it out there, but another fish just jumped just a few seconds ago. So anyhow, have a great, great summer day. Stay cool. Paulides out.